Today I'm working on this mid-century Drexel table. This is from Drexel's Profile line of furniture from the 1950s. And this is actually one of my favorite furniture lines from that time period. And actually one of the first pieces that I refinished was a dresser from the Drexel Profile line of furniture. And I've always liked them ever since then. This particular piece is actually not in terrible shape, but it does have some evidence of mouse activity. You can kind of see down here, there's some mouse droppings and some wet spots, and there's another wet spot up here. So it's kind of gross, and my biggest concern is just whether or not those wet spots are going to leave stains in the wood. And I'm not even sure if there's finish on this piece. If there is finish, it's really thin, so there probably isn't much in between the mouse urine and the wood, which isn't a good thing. And right now I'm just planning on refinishing the top where this spot is, and also this lower shelf, since that's got all of this going on. The rest of it is actually in pretty good shape. The legs are looking pretty good. There's some paint there, I think, that I can probably just clean off. So the first thing to do is just to clean up all the mouse issues. I'm going to start with some naphtha. I don't want to use anything water-based because it's only about 28 degrees Fahrenheit out here, so it would probably freeze. I'm going to try and wipe this paint off of here with the naphtha and some fine steel wool. Oh, okay. That came right off. Maybe that wasn't paint. I don't know what that was. That was easy. While I was cleaning it, I found some spots that look like the veneer may have been sanded through. Like right here, this light spot in the corner. That looks like a sand through. And that actually could have been from the factory. I have seen pieces where I'm stripping off the original finish, and underneath the finish are veneer sand throughs. It's actually not that unusual, at least in my experience. But I want to make sure if I do any sanding on this, I have to be extra careful in this area to not remove any more veneer there. And there's a suspicious looking spot right here where it looks like the veneer may have been sanded a little too much and is almost sanded through. Either that is just a natural thing in the wood, but hopefully this comes across on camera, but you can kind of see how the pores of the wood are visible here, these little dark marks. And then when you get into this area, there's no pores visible. It's like the texture of the wood completely changes right there. It's really smooth. So I think that might be where the veneer is getting really thin. So I'm just going to make sure if I do any sanding on top here, be careful, especially in this spot, not to sand too much so I don't go through the veneer. And there are some spots like this spot here on the edge of this piece of veneer where it also looks like it's almost sanded through. Because again, these little grain marks, these pores in the wood that are going this way, just stop right here. They only get to about here, and then there's no more. So again, I'll just have to be careful not to sand too much. And there is some little dark mark there and some scratching. Hopefully that's not a problem. Well, we got some snow since the last time I worked on this table, but I want to try and use some stripper on it to see if there's any finish on there that needs to be removed. Hopefully it's not too cold for the stripper to work. It's just above freezing out here. So the stripper did work, and I was able to remove what little bit of finish was on here. And now that that finish is off, it's even more apparent that this spot here is a veneer sand through. And there's also spots on the edge of the veneer where the veneer was sanded through. So I have to be extra careful from here on to not sand this any more than I absolutely have to. I think the next step is to try some oxalic acid to hopefully get rid of the stains from the mice. And there's also a little bit of grayish black stain in the middle of the top, and just see if the oxalic acid helps with those. Okay, it's time to put the oxalic acid on, and it's really cold out, so I mix it up with some really hot water, and hopefully it doesn't freeze. The oxalic acid worked really well to get that grayish mark out in the middle of the table, but it didn't do anything for the mouse stains. As you can see here, it's still visible. So I did a little research, and I read somewhere that hydrogen peroxide can help remove pet stains on wood floors. So I decided to try some on the mouse stains, and I first just added some to one spot on the lower shelf. And here is how it looked about a day after I applied the hydrogen peroxide. This is the spot right here that I'm pointing at, and it's a lot lighter than the rest of the stains. So it seemed to be working. So I took it inside to apply some more hydrogen peroxide to the rest of the stains. I ended up doing a bunch of applications, and I would usually just leave it overnight, and then the next day I'd apply some more, and just repeated that until it looked like it had lightened enough. So after putting on about 4 or 5 applications of the hydrogen peroxide and letting it sit overnight in between each application, this looks so much better. You can just barely see some shadows of the old stains, but if you didn't know that they were ever there, then you wouldn't know that they were ever there. And the one on the top is also pretty much completely gone. And I just added the hydrogen peroxide to the spots with a Q-tip instead of putting it over the whole thing. Mostly because I really like the color of this, and I didn't want to lighten it if I didn't have to. But when you do it just spot by spot, you do run the risk of creating a light spot there instead of the formerly dark stain. So if you look closely here, there's a little bit in some spots of a light halo around where the stain used to be from where the hydrogen peroxide bleached the unstained wood a little bit, just past the stain. So if you didn't want something like that, then you'd want to put the peroxide on the whole tabletop. But it doesn't bother me. So I've got the table turned over, and I was getting a closer look here at this piece, and I noticed that it's not finished. I can tell just by feeling it that it's raw wood. So I guess this piece has been refinished, which would explain all the sand-throughs on the top, the sand-throughs on the veneer. So I'll put some finish on here when I put the finish on the top and on the shelf. I guess I just forgot to finish this. I also noticed that there's this little piece that is cracked here, and it's hard to see, but on the top side of this piece there's a piece of veneer that runs along the whole edge, and it's actually a really thick piece of veneer. And I think that's the only thing right now holding this little piece in place. But it looks like I might be able to get it out and then re-glue it. Although I don't know if I'll be able to get rid of that gap. Just the way it's sitting now, it seems like it's down all the way it will go, and there's still a gap there. But let me see if I can get it out first. I don't want to try too hard to get it out, because I could end up just making more damage if it really doesn't want to come out. Well, I don't think it's going to come out, and I don't want to just cause more damage to try to get it out. And I don't think it's really a structural issue, so I think what I'm going to do is just shoot some glue into a little gap that's down here between this piece and the veneer on top, and just clamp it down, and I think just leave it as is. And while I have the table turned over, we can see here the date of 1955 on here by Drexel. I found this catalog page from an old Drexel catalog, and it shows this table in it, and it calls it a corner table, K73, and that's what got here, K73-4. I'm not sure what -4 was for, but the dimensions they have are 30 inches wide by 30 inches deep by 26 inches high. This is actually 24 inches, so slightly different, but maybe they changed the dimensions over the years. This catalog is from 1960, and this table is from 55. So maybe they made some changes. But it's a bit of an odd size, I feel like. It's too tall to be a coffee table, and I feel like it's too big, too wide to be an end table. So they call it a corner table. I don't know if that means it would be put in a corner in a room, or maybe it was meant to go in between two sectional couches. Like you'd have one piece of the couch going this way, and then the table at the end, and then the other section going that way. Maybe that's what it was meant to be. Not sure. But it's cool to see it in the old catalog like this. So earlier, when I had stripped the top, I taped off this section with some blue tape, like this. And when I removed it, it tore out some of the grain here. This is a spot here where it tore it out kind of deeply. And if I wet it down with some naphtha, it mostly disappears, which tells me that if I just put some clear finish over this, it would probably be fine. It would probably not be that visible, but it is kind of deep, and you can kind of feel it. So I want to try to fix that. And to do that, I'm going to use one of these hard fill sticks. And basically you just melt it into there, and it fills it up, so you won't feel it anymore. And I'll scrape it with this thing here. That looks pretty good. I decided I'm just going to put a clear finish over this But before I do that, I want to wet it down with some naphtha, and this will show pretty much what it'll look like with a clear finish on it. And you can see there's some pretty big scratches here. Not much I'm going to be able to do about that. This is a veneer, so I can't just sand them out or I'll go through the veneer like someone already has before me. And if I stained the piece, then those would look even worse because they would collect the stain. So I'm just going to leave them, and it is as it is. And I don't know how well you can see it on the camera, but there's a kind of a dark section here, kind of in this area here, and then it's lighter, a little bit lighter over here. I wonder if somebody had something sitting on here so that the top didn't fade equally across the whole thing, and it left a little bit of a mark here. But again, there's not much I can do about it. I can't sand it out because it's a veneer, and I'll just go through the veneer. And I'm not going to bother with stains or anything on this one, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. Okay, it's time for the finishing step, and I'm going to use some clear satin lacquer as a top coat. And it's only about 38 degrees here right now, which is probably below the recommended temperature to spray lacquer, but I'm going to give it a try anyway. I'm going to spray some really light coats, just a few, see how it comes out. And I'm just doing the top and the shelf below. Those are the only two parts that I am refinishing. And now you can kind of see the difference in the color that I was talking about. There's a darker section here, and this is lighter around here. I think somebody probably just had something sitting on the table for years and years that made that dark spot. And here it is, all finished. I'm going to forego my usual final shots in the driveway because it's covered with snow and slush. So I'm just going to leave it here. It's definitely not perfect, but I like it. This one's got some imperfections that I couldn't get out on the top, like the veneer sand-throughs. You can see one of the sand-throughs back here. The shadow on the top where something was probably sitting on a table for years. You can see that dark spot really well here. I couldn't get rid of that stuff without putting new veneer on, and I didn't want to do that. Putting new veneer on this top would be complicated because there's a solid piece of wood here. I think this is walnut. And then there's this other separate piece here. And then the veneer is inset in the middle, so it's all flush. So it would be really difficult to get this piece out without taking this piece off and that piece off and just taking it all apart. It would be just way too much work, so I'm choosing just to leave it as it is. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching.